Today on Beardo and Weirdo, we are joined by Stephen Rea, who grew up as a personal friend of Ozzy Osbourne and has written a book about it called Ozzy and Me. My God, you won't believe how this story starts. It's amazing.
Make sure you sign up for fan clubs, kids. Make sure you sign up for fan clubs.
It actually does pan out for one person on planet Earth. Beardo and Weirdo, Chris, Kael, and me, Craig Gass, are on tour. Go to getgas.com. I've got dates coming up in Baltimore, Detroit, Honolulu, the Bay Area, San Francisco. Chris Kael is going on tour with Five Finger Death Punch. You can get VIP packages at where?
ChrisKael.com, and you can pick up all those tickets for the Five Finger Death Punch tour at fivefingerdeathpunch.com.
Yeah.
See ya.
We are being joined by Stephen Rea. Is that the correct pronunciation? Is Stephen
Rea? Yeah, Rea as in like when my wife divorced, she was an X-ray.
Oh man! And
certainly not a ray of sunshine.
This guy has the most incredible story. Chris, when you're a kid, who was your all-time favorite artist that you grew up watching?
It was Gene Simmons from Kiss.
It was Gene Simmons.
Yep.
Okay. Your mom, on your behalf, loves you so much. You're such a good boy. She loves her son. She writes a letter.
All true.
She writes a letter to the Kiss Army fan club and says, my boy wants to go see Kiss in a faraway place, and we just want to know, how do we get these tickets?
Mm-hmm.
And Gene Simmons actually has somebody reach out to your mom, not to have sex with her like he does with everybody else, but to say, I want your boy at my show. Just get yourself to that town and I'll get you into the show. And he gives you backstage passes, and then you become friends with Gene's. You can do now for $50,000.
Yeah.
You can actually, that is a thing that can really happen. You can become.
I got to sell some more of my own base packages before I can get there.
But Stephen, an innocent kid in Belfast, Ireland, his mother writes a letter to the Ozzy fan club and says, my boy is the biggest Ozzy fan. How do we get tickets to Rock in Rio? And this begins a lifelong friendship with Stephen, this incredibly innocent-looking man, and Ozzy Osbourne.
The smile says more, though.
Yeah. My God, Stephen.
That's awesome.
How in the world do you explain, do kids in school even believe you back then?
Yeah, it is. It's such a crazy story. I mean, this is 1985. And to sort of fill in a little bit of the backstory, what you mentioned. I mean, basically what you've said is ostensibly true. That's basically what happened.
That's
my
incredible.
Mom wrote a letter and I became friends with Ozzy and Sharon. I mean, that is true.
How old were you at this point?
15.
15 years old.
15.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so 15. So, you know, we're talking 40 years ago. It's before the internet and Googles and all the rest of it. So basically, they announced Rock in Rio, which of course, you still know, it still goes occasionally, but this was the first ever Rock in Rio. It was the biggest rock show the world had ever seen. It was a 10-day event. Iron Maiden, AC/DC, Whitesnake, Scorpions, Queen, Rod Stewart, every band kind of under the sun. And so as a throwaway remark at dinner one evening, and we were a working class blue collar family. You know, we lived in what we call a semi-detached house, a little bungalow. We didn't have a microwave. We didn't have a dishwasher. We weren't a rich family. And I saw that Ozzy was playing this show, this Rock in Rio. And literally as like a throwaway remark over dinner one night, I said to my dad, oh, Ozzy's doing the big show in Rio kind of thing. And my dad was like, oh, that sounds great. You know, he wasn't an Ozzy fan, but he was a big music fan. He goes, we should find out about that. So it's 1984. It's like November 1984. So in those days, I mean, what would it take nowadays? 2 seconds on Google to find out how you buy tickets and how to get there. But back then, it was, you know, what do you do? And my mom wrote a letter to the Ozzy Osbourne Fan Club, which I was a member of, and said,
oh, nice.
You know, my son is a huge Ozzy fan. We've heard about the story in Brazil. We're interested in going. Can you tell us anything? Where do we get tickets? Where is the show being held? How do we go?
Innocent question. We just want to go.
Yeah, we just want to go. And can you give us any details?
Sure.
And my mom hadn't even put the phone number on the letter. What happened was the girl who sort of opened the letters for the fan club passed it to Ozzy's secretary and said, I think you want to see this. This is some nutcase from Belfast. he's claiming there's some that he's going to go. So she found from information, she found my mom's number and she called. And basically she called and said to my mom, if you get to Rio, if you can buy a ticket to Rio on the plane, whatever hotel, we will take care of you once you get there. Don't worry about anything.
Oh, that's
so
incredible.
I go to Rio. They give me, Ozzy did 2 shows. They give me a backstage pass.
Oh,
they took me on the side of the stage for both those. They took me on Ozzy's bus to and from the venue. And then on the last, the last night, I went up to his room, up to his suite with his assistant to help deliver the bags. And I just wanted to say thanks, Ozzy, for everything. And he said to me, call me in the morning, we'll go for breakfast.
That's incredible.
Wow.
And this is
me, my parents, and Ozzy.
And this is Ozzy Osbourne, pre-Osbournes, pre all the cameras, just doing this out of the generosity and the kindness.
And absolutely. There was no, that breakfast, it's still, obviously my book's about knowing him for 40 years, but when I think about all the crazy times and all the fabulous times I had with him, that still might be my favorite memory. Think of that. Ozzy, me, and my parents. No assistants, no security, no handlers, nothing. Ozzy just came downstairs and had breakfast with us and spent, maybe a couple of hours. Sharon came and joined us later, but he just sat out of. There was no publicity. He wasn't doing it to get in the paper or anything at all. He just did it to have breakfast.
No clicks, no likes, just being Ozzy.
What's fascinating about this is Stephen is one of a handful of people that have similar stories with Ozzy. Mm-hmm. We had Big Dave on a few weeks ago. Big Dave was a fan who befriended Ozzy as a driver. Ozzy enjoys his company so much, they start letting him essentially babysit the kids. He eventually becomes an employee. Before Dave was a fan named Tony Dennis, who was a fan, a super fan who went to the shows. And as a super fan, they were like, you know what? You care about Ozzy? Come here. Here's a job.
Yeah.
Stephen, and we're going to get to all this, but Stephen is just a fan that Ozzy just disarms. And vice versa.
Yeah.
And so begins this relationship. Do you still remember the surrealness of a normal human being having breakfast with you that you had only seen in posters and had just recently seen on stage the night before?
Absolutely. And so that it's funny, the first time I ever met him, I mean, I was a huge fan. I'm sure all of us, even when we get on to our advancing ages, like me, as I close in on 60, we can still remember, what it was like to be 13, 14, 15, 16 and be a huge rock fan.
Absolutely.
Of course.
You could still, and to worship the ground that these rock stars walked on. So I remember the very first night I met him. I tell the story in the book that we went into their hotel. They were staying at, a 5-star hotel on Copacabana Beach. And my mom and dad were like, come on, let's go to the bar kind of thing. So we went into the bar and the secretary, Ozzy's secretary, who I'm still friends with, who I saw today, bizarrely. 40 years later, I'm still one of my best friends. Wow. And she saw me in the bar. And she goes to Ozzy and goes, that's the kid sitting over there. You should go introduce. He's come. That's the kid I was telling you about that's come all this way.
Ozzy's got a couple drinks in him.
Yeah.
He's like, what's this 15-year-old doing at the bar?
He came to me and introduced himself. Hi, I'm Ozzy. And I'm like, I literally couldn't say a word. Just sort of sat and looked at him, was struck dumb. And he sort of gave up and went back to his table. It's like that. Why am I wasting my time with that idiot sort of thing?
It's really
absolutely. Absolutely. And that was the whole way. You mentioned there about the relationship and that we had, and it spanned decades. But I was always a fan. I was always, even when I became, part of the inner circle or became a trusted friend or whatever, an employee, whatever way you want to put it, whatever stage of my life I was at, I was always a fan of the music. That always came first for me, and I stayed a fan.
And by the way, I feel bad that we haven't even mentioned this. The whole reason we're having Stephen on is because he has a book that he's written about his life with Ozzy. And I think it's fascinating. It's Ozzy and Me, correct? Is that the name of the?
Yes.
Ozzy and Me. And
literally, that was his breakfast. Ozzy and Me.
And then his life.
I love it.
And then his life. Oh. And I wanted to ask you a question before we start digging into the next step, which I think is really fascinating. The next step that brings him a step closer to Ozzy. Mm-hmm. His book is broken down into 4 segments: fan, roadie, friend, and a phrase I'm not familiar with, but I looked it up. Ligger. Ligger, with a hard R, by the way. Ligger, and
they're a little more liberal with that in Ireland.
Yeah, Stephen, can you explain what Ligger means?
A Ligger is someone that I'm sure both of you have experienced in your life. Somebody who poses about backstage to be seen and doesn't actually do any work.
Okay,
I'm a Ligger. All right, there you go.
I didn't want to say it, but but he is. Craig is, so he can use the hard R because it's his word.
Well, I don't know. Was Kerrang! Magazine, did that make it across the States?
Oh yeah.
Yes, sir.
For the heavier of the fans, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So in the growing up in the UK in the 80s and 90s, that was like the rock Bible. Kerrang! Was the rock magazine, because I know you had Circus and Hit Parader and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Kerrang! Kind of coined that phrase.
Ligger, okay.
Ligger, and they would say ligging about backstage. So, we went to see Def Leppard. We were at Def Leppard last Tuesday. Ligging backstage with Angus Young and Tony Iommi, or whatever it may be. A ligger is basically someone who is taking advantage of the free drink and the better seats or whatever. It doesn't really bring anything to the
It's
table.
getting more personal as he described.
You mean someone who goes backstage and steals Billy Joel's water?
That's a whole other story. All right, listen.
Exactly.
All right, so the more you explain it, the more I realize this episode's going to be more about me. But
you ligger.
But what's interesting is that in Stephen's book, he writes he's put out a couple books. Which is crazy to me. The guy has written about a couple of books about soccer. Mm-hmm. And it's like, why would you put out any books before you tell your life story? That's so insane. But he writes.
You realize the extent of the fan base of soccer?
True.
This is business. True. Come on.
True. Very true. But Stephen writes like a fan.
I love it.
He writes like a fan. He breaks down what he learns about the music industry. I got a job, and then they handed me this thing that's called a PD, which is a per diem, which is a cash thing that you get every week or every other week. He breaks down the difference as he learns about the difference between a satin pass versus a laminate. And
if I got a sticky, if I have 2 shows at one night in Vegas that I want to go to, and I know I got a laminate in one and a sticky at the other, I'm going to the laminate show.
King Ligger, Chris Kael over here.
There you go.
But
write it down.
What's interesting,
I can use the hard R now too.
Yeah. The next
in that word.
The next step, if I'm understanding the story correctly, is that Stephen starts getting contacted by that secretary. And the secretary, starts reaching out to you and realizes that Stephen, as a superfan, is a source of information. So she starts calling him saying, hey, I got it. Who was the lineup in the band? Blah, 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 blah. Is that correct, Stephen?
That's exactly right. So
that's awesome.
Again, I actually, my editor gave me this line. There's a line in the book that's something like, I was the right kid in the right place at the right time, or something with the right rock star. But what he meant by that was, again, as we just spoke about, this is 40 years ago. This is pre-internet. And so you had a fan club. In those days, it wasn't email blasts and 48-hour merch sales. Right. It was, you wrote a letter, your name went on a database somewhere. If we had spreadsheets, did we have spreadsheets in 1986? I'm not sure we did. But your name went on like a little cardboard index card.
Right. A written down dossier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once every 3 months, you would get an Ozzy Osbourne newsletter. Hey, Ozzy's recording an album. Hey, his new T-shirt's for sale if you send us $18 or whatever. Anyway, so it was all very analog, and they were trying to expand the fan club. Sharron was always sort of at the forefront of fan engagement. Even her whole time I've known her, she's very much into connecting with the fans, be it these days through Instagram and all the rest of it. But back then, it was through letters and magazines. And so I was, Lynn, who is the secretary, had been in the music business her whole life, her whole professional career, but she wasn't an Ozzy fan. You know, she was in the music business, she was an employee. And so people would write in and they would say, hey, what's the B-side of this single? Or, hey, where do I find this album? Or who was in the band at 19, whatever. And she would call me up. She would say, Stephen, got this. Do you know the answer? I would, yep, it's such and such. And they started sort of referring to me as the consultant. You know, when they got stuff, and they'd say, oh, from the consultant, he knows, from Stephen. And then I was also interested in journalism. I wanted to be a journalist, so I was mad keen to write. So they were, of course, like even to this day, if you could write for free, everybody wants somebody to write for free, you know? So it was like, hey, do you want to write about going to Brazil? Do you want to write about Ozzy's last album? Do you want to? And so I was just so lucky that I was a fan. I was, you know, like a walking encyclopedia. I wanted to write, and it was at an age where those skills had value.
Oh, yeah. And you said you were writing for free, but my God, the perks.
Oh, yeah.
The bonuses, going to Rio, getting the backstage passes, getting the laminates, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's...
And it continues from there, obviously.
Yeah,
that's what the whole book is. But I found this particular detail really interesting. And I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but was it Lynn? Is that the name of the secretary?
Yeah.
That Lynn starts calling Stephen instead of, and I'm just guessing, instead of reaching out to the people she works with, because, and I'm guessing, she doesn't want to look like she doesn't know who she's working
Exactly.
with.
And we have lovingly talked about the effect and the impact of nerds.
Oh, yeah.
Like I am a Kiss nerd.
Yes. Yes.
Sounds like Steve here.
Stephen,
Ozzy nerd. He does all of it. And
he knows everything about Ozzy.
Nerds run the world. Love it.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is you start becoming, the next step is you start writing. When you start spending more time with Ozzy, he sees you writing and making notes to remember stories, and he's not bothered by it at all.
Yeah. And that's funny. You know, it's a good point. You know, like everything, when you're young, you're stupid. And
absolutely.
Some of us still at 51.
Yeah.
Kind of stupid. That's why we play bass.
Yeah. Well, with the benefit of hindsight, you look back and you go, you know, what was I thinking? Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
God bless the innocence of youth.
Cheeky 17-year-old. You know, I was looking through my photographs. You know, there's photographs in the book, and I was looking through some of the photographs, and I'm just like, these are the most private, intimate photographs of Ozzy in the dressing room at his house. You know, and it didn't for a second occur to me to go, is it okay if I stick is it okay, Mr. Ozzy rock global icon, if I shove my camera in your face and take your photograph while you're trying to relax before this? You know, it didn't even, just the lack of awareness is staggering. And it's the same with writing. It was exactly the same. I would just sit and write down everything. You know,
because he was telling you stories. He'd tell you stories about, you know, it was Bill Ward, and he would tell you like some crazy intimate story about how crazy Bill Ward was. Mm-hmm. He'd write it down, and he'd write it so he wouldn't forget it. And I understand where Stephen's coming from. Wow, that's such a good story. Exactly. I don't want to miss any detail of that. I'll do that sometimes after watching Dave Chappelle or Dave Attell in a club. I'll be like, oh, that's such a good line. I don't want to forget that.
You mean when you forgot to bring in your dummy phone that you turn off one and keep the other one? That one, Craig?
But yeah, it's I understand that. Now, what's interesting is you start to get to spend more time with them, and you are an innocent. You're an innocent because you are at no time showing any signs of wanting to take advantage of this situation. So they keep you close by. But I have to believe that along the way, you start witnessing things you should never do because you see.
Absolutely not. It was a game of chess, a cup of tea, and to bed before 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Proper British gentleman.
But you certainly learn what not to do when you see other people getting taken out. Yeah.
So absolutely. So a couple of things that you mentioned which are interesting. The first is, and I've sort of analyzed this a bit, and people have asked me, and I think one of the reasons I did have the relationship I did was because I didn't ask for anything.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys anybody at all in the public eye has it. Everybody wants something.
Absolutely.
Oh, we've got this great chef. Great. After 2 weeks, hey, what do we do about Ozzy and what Ozzy cooks at home for his dinner? Oh, we got a martial arts instructor. Hey, what about we make a DVD, Ozzy and whatever, What about, why don't you come on my podcast?
Right. Of course.
Yeah. That's the hardest part about all this for me.
Yeah.
Everybody wants something.
Absolutely.
And I never did. I never wanted. I think actually funny. I was thinking about this the other day. I think I maybe got his autograph like 3 times. I think they were like at the end of tours, or I remember at my 100th show, maybe I asked him to sign. Very occasionally in 40 years, I probably asked him 3 or 4 times to sign something.
Interesting, because we just did an episode recently about a photographer who we won't name that was known for coming backstage to Ozzy shows that he was working and saying, by the way, I brought a stack of things for you to sign.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And
a real Ligger.
Yeah. But you show that. I think people reveal themselves, and you just clearly people reveal themselves in the words they use and the behavior they demonstrate. And Stephen was continuously showing he was revealing himself as just someone who loved Ozzy
and love for journalism as well. Like getting the story, writing it all down. I love the combination of the 2 passions, putting those together.
Yeah, but I am curious, along the way, Sharon famously has a temper.
What?
And yeah, and
I got to read about it in Stephen's book.
My God, I
haven't heard this before.
She is so proud to be the protector that she's always been.
What I was going to say. Yeah, and the protector.
Yeah,
that's absolutely it.
And do you have an early memory of going like, "Whoa, do not piss off this woman"?
Yeah, there was only so much. The book started off a lot longer, and when you get the editor or whatever, and they cut it down. So there were some stories that didn't make it. But, I think about that sometimes. I think about, you guys will know as well, obviously, but how much of a macho world heavy metal is. And you imagine what it was like in the 80s, 40 years ago, how much more it was, and even with Sharon going back to the 70s, and think how hard it must have been to be Ozzy Osbourne's manager just for a start, whenever he was, whatever.
Yeah.
But then to be a woman in that industry.
Oh yeah.
And how hard she must have had to fight.
Great point.
I can relate to that too, because our 2 day-to-day managers, both female, Jackie and Constance, are day-to-day going to do all the radio. So they're out there fighting that good fight. Even today, because of the work of people like Sharon Osbourne, blazing that trail for them.
And you know what? You bring up something that I wanted to ask you about. Chris and I are both in recovery. We're both addicts who are in recovery. I just got 21 years. And
that's right.
Chris,
I need to get you a chip. I forgot.
Chris has
over 4.
Over 4 years.
5 in October.
Were you ever a drug guy, Stephen?
No.
Never a drug guy.
I'm
not in that environment at that age. He was like, I've seen enough.
But you do mention in the book that you would see him hurting himself with drugs and alcohol.
Absolutely. I mean, there's to deviate a little bit. The prologue is written, the introduction, I should say, the foreword is written by Jack.
Right.
And I think it tells you, just the way you said there, that people reveal themselves through what their actions and what they say and what they do. It might have been the day after the funeral, or it might have been 3 days after the funeral. Jack came to me excuse me, and he said to me, Stephen, I would like to write the foreword for your book. He knew I'd written a book, he knew it was coming out. And he wrote that on the plane back to LA. And so think about that. He had just buried his father.
Yeah.
And he was on the plane home, and he sat and wrote the foreword for me. And I didn't ask him to.
Right.
He volunteered. And the reason I mention it is because just what you mentioned there, I thought Jack had a great line in the foreword. He said,
I was going to bring this up.
Stephen was there in the 80s, a decade my dad famously didn't remember.
Yes. Yes.
It's nice to have a documentary, and then
it's not even I'm sure you guys, when you were at your lowest, maybe you went on a bender for a weekend or maybe even 5 days. He had a decade.
A decade. Yeah. And Stephen, if you don't mind me pointing out, I did see you mention this once as part of a larger conversation, that at the funeral, Jack asked Stephen, when is that book coming out? And Stephen said, essentially, I'm glad you brought it up because I don't want this to look bad, because it just happened to be the timing of it.
Exactly. Didn't want it to be opportunistic.
The publishing industry is so slow. They set this date close to a year earlier, and now it's going to come out a couple months after Ozzy passes. So it might have a look to it. And that is when Jack says, I want to write the forwards. And he said, and also said, my dad would want you to put up, don't delay it. My dad would want you to put it out. He said something really kind in that. He said a few very kind things, but one of them is Stephen doesn't write about my father. He writes about knowing my father.
Ooh,
and
that's nice.
Yeah, which I think is an incredible endorsement.
And one of the things that has perhaps got lost in the shuffle a little bit, like I just said, I've been a huge Ozzy fan for many years, and I love his music, and I think he was the greatest hard rock singer the world's ever seen. But and I know that there are millions of people around the world who have a similar view. But one of the things I think that unfortunately, and it's nobody's fault, this of course is the way it played out, but unfortunately, one of the things that got lost a little bit in the shuffle was the sort of humanization of him, in the sense that he was a husband, a father, a brother. He had sisters, he had kids, he had grandkids, and it's like, I'm sure all of us have experienced grief and loss, but the family, the sort of the side of Ozzy, and I was so delighted the outpouring of love for him, especially over here. I know you guys in the States, but especially in England, his hometown of Birmingham came to a standstill for him. There was tens of thousands of people on the streets. It was so fantastic to see, in a way, and I was so gratified. I had so much gratitude for the outpouring of love, so their family could see how much people, how much respect they had from him. But what did get lost a little bit, I think, is just what it's like to lose someone you love. Because he was Ozzy Osbourne, but he was also a family guy as well.
Yeah, there's something you mentioned that I've heard Jack mention before, that Ozzy loved that people thought he was out of it, and he kind of leaned into that. He wanted people to.
Did either of you guys ever meet him?
What's weird is I was always intimidated. So I was always backstage. I was a Ligger. Yeah. I was a Ligger. I had tons of friends. You and I have a couple of mutual friends. Mike Inez and I know Mike Inez is so social that I have met thousands of people around the world who say they're all good friends with Mike Inez. That's how social Mike Inez is. But I genuinely talk to Mike Inez several times a week. Mm-hmm. I love Mike Inez, but I never ever. I just thought there'll be a moment I'm gonna, and there was a couple moments where we're in the same space, and I just didn't try. I just nodded. He walked by, and I thought, I'll get him. There just has to be there in my life as a comedian. There just are moments where people go, "Oh man, have you met this guy? This guy's so funny," and especially because I do impressions. Hey, this guy does an impression of this guy and whatever. So I just thought my time was going to come. Mm-hmm. It never came, but I saw Ozzy so many times, which means I was in the same space as Stephen so many times and just never got to meet you. What were you going to say, Chris?
I had the opportunity to meet Ozzy Osbourne on the No More Tours tour back in the 90s.
Yeah. That's right. At the radio station you worked at.
I worked at a college radio station doing like a heavy metal show.
This story is great.
And me and my co-host on that show went to a meet and greet with Ozzy Osbourne, had the photo set up, all that stuff. And Ozzy talked to us for a good 15 minutes about how much he hated doing videos. I was this nobody college radio DJ, maybe a few hundred listeners each week. And he took the time just sharing with me and Will about, I hate fucking doing videos.
Yeah.
Did you get a little Polaroid with Ozzy?
I did. Yes. Yeah. He's, I believe he's in, it might be a throne of some sort. I can't remember. It's been a long, long time.
I think it's on a black couch.
Yes.
I think it's a black couch and it says no more tours behind him.
That is the one.
Yeah. That was his first farewell show, 33 years ago.
Oh man.
When Mike had just joined the band.
Yep.
Mike Inez just joined the band. And you know what? I mean, listen, Stephen, you're a fan, and I am so fascinated with this idea. I know exactly what this feels like. You get access because people enjoy having you around, and you get to witness things that you're not prepared for. Like, I'm sure you saw band members venting about whatever, about each other, about a situation, about whatever. And you're like, wow, there's that guitar player, that bass player complaining about the drummer or whatever.
I would love to hear those success problems.
Yeah.
The stuff that those guys were bitching about. Because I know I find myself bitching about the dumbest stuff and got to check myself sometimes. Like, hold on. Yeah. You're on $1 million tour bus touring the world. Shut up.
Yeah. But as
there is.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just because you mentioned it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it made the final cut of the book, but there was one of the guys in the book is an English guy. Who I toured with a lot. He's a good friend of mine still to this day. And he's a bricklayer. He's a construction, worker in England. And when he didn't tour with Ozzy, and I had my little, I was in Belfast and, Trouble touring Belfast. We had the Troubles and it was grim and terrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I do remember one like both of us won the road with Ozzy, and we were, in California or, wherever, Sacramento, whatever. And they'd just done the sound check, and we had those 2-3 hours before the show starts between sound check. Mm-hmm. And Keith, this guy, and he had like a rough day, and he was complaining about something. I was standing, I was bitching because the guitarist was whining about this, and the two of us, like at the same time, we both had like this realization: shut the fuck up! Listen to us. We have terrible lives. Yeah. We're getting paid to tour the world with Ozzy fucking Osbourne.
5-star
and here
hotels.
We are bitching on a Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock because this bloke said the wrong thing. The two of us sort of looked at each other and went,
Yeah. I have had to stop myself around crew members. Like if I'm tired, I'm like, I didn't get that much sleep. Meanwhile, our crew guys are there from 6 a.m. till 1 a.m, squeezing in maybe 4 or 5 hours on a moving bus. So there were a few times at the beginning, I was like, I'm just not getting any sleep. I'm so tired.
Yeah.
And our old drum tech, Angry Nate, goes, really? You didn't get sleep? Shut the fuck up. Thank you, Angry Nate.
It's funny you mentioned that, and you were talking earlier as well about PDs and stuff. But when I originally wrote the book, I think, I don't know if you guys agree, but there is a great sort of mystery about the about the music business, touring business, rock business, whatever.
Sure.
People don't know what it's like. They don't know, what it's like on the road, and they want to know what's it really like to stand at the side of the stage, or what happens when the artists come off stage, or where and all. And I the first sort of version, or one of the early versions of this book, it had all that in. Mm. It was like, the lighting guys have to be in at 7 a.m. because they have to put the lights up first, and then they have to wait till the end and everything else comes down so they can get there. And whenever you think of Hard Party and Roadies, these guys had call times at 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning. And then if you were with the band, like I did, I was, assistant tour manager, and I would waltz in at 5 p.m. and get some catering and then go and sit in the dressing room for 2 hours. And then so I was trying to give, and just like you were talking about, about stickies or satins and laminates. And, people think, I've got a backstage pass. You would give out, somebody would do your laundry for free. And you say, here's a backstage pass to the show tonight. I'm getting to party with Ozzy Osbourne in his dress. No, you're not. You're going to be held in a room. Yep. And the bass player might come and say hello.
Right.
Why's it got to be bass player? But it is true. I'd be the first one to go in, talk to everybody.
Right.
But I'm very Mike Inez in that sense. I'm going in and saying hi.
It's because my two best friends in the rock business are Mike Inez and Robert Trujillo. They're both
wonderful humans, both
incredible human beings. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because in the book, Stephen points out, I had a short amount of time to get as much out of Stephen as possible.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, all right, it's in chronology. He's got the dates. Like this is this date, this city, this date, this city. And I'm like, all right.
So he took better records than Ross Halfin?
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
Yes.
Just checking.
Yeah. Those aren't my dates.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so Stephen, at one point, I happened to hit a chapter where Stephen, because he's with Ozzy and he's working because Ozzy is such a top-notch performer, he's surrounded by some of the top-notch touring professionals in the industry. Mm-hmm. So someone says to Stephen, and this is the way it happens, would you like to do another tour away from Ozzy? You can get a job on the crew working for Accept. And then your gig would be, you'd be on the crew, and I think you had a taste of it for a minute and you realized that was the real job. That was the 7 a.m.
Absolutely.
Right? What was the offer for, what was the...
Yeah, that's right. It was, and again, I don't know if this is still the case, but in the old days, the spotlights were done by truck drivers.
Right.
Is that still the case?
No, they have electronic. A lot of stuff is, all on computer, including pyro. There was a guy that I knew who passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, Viggy, who came up with a program where you could sync up your music to the pyro so that to the millisecond.
That goes your video I showed you.
Oh, that's right.
Clearly. Yeah. Lines up with that. Yeah. It's incredible. So, but a lot of time they'll also have a local guy will be the spotlight guy, and they'll
right. And so Stephen's saying that truck drivers would actually
truck drivers. So in the old days, it was the truck drivers.
Man, so they had to drive all night and then do the show and then get back in the truck and drive again.
Yeah.
Which is where Stephen comes in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the rock and roll business.
Yeah. Which is where Stephen comes in. They give Stephen a chance to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they sort of say, and I think, I looking back on it, it was a guy called Gary who worked with Ozzy, and he worked with a lot of bands, and he had a good career in the music industry. And I think he was like giving me an in,
Mm-hmm.
I think he was like, come do this crappy job where you work the spotlights. We'll kick off one of the truck drivers. You can have that job, and we'll pay you for every time that you do the spotlight. We'll give you the money. And I think it was an in. It was like a way to get into the rock business,
exactly,
into the touring business, rather, I should say. And I did it, but I like you said, I just realized I only ever worked the time that I worked on the road was with Ozzy or with Sabbath. That was it, because they were, and I never really fancied working as like a professional roadie and having to go Cyndi Lauper one week and Coldplay the next or anything.
And when you're an artist journalist, like, why would you want to not use those skills and that passion and just be a spotlight guy? You were meant for more, clearly, being able to write this book. So you took that right path. So kudos to you for seeing that early.
Well, I think, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I remember my girlfriend I had at the time basically saying to me, you can, and again, it's not to denigrate, all three of us know how hard it is for those. That's a crazy, anybody who spent any time on the road know that a road crew is one of the most demanding, relentless jobs.
Absolutely.
I'm not, please don't think that I'm denigrating that. I'm just saying it was never, it wasn't for me.
Very true. Yeah, you knew your path and you took that decision, and it's clearly worked out well for you. Not only the wealth of stories that you've got, but taking that time to write this book as well. So kudos to you for seeing that early. Yeah, because a lot of people will accept just to be accept. See, little pun. But a lot of people will just accept that entry into the business and just be miserable.
Yeah.
And there are people that love that. I mean, all our crew, we seem to have like people who are who love the position that they're in. So to be able to get in that spotlight position, be like, that energy, that vibe's not where I am at.
It absolutely is hard work. There's a friend of mine who I introduced you to when we were in Australia, who's the lighting guy for Metallica. And I remember asking him, we were in the same city, and I said, hey, I'm in town. You're in town. You want to go to a comedy club tonight? And he wrote, LOL, I'm in the middle of a 60-hour shift right now.
Yep.
And that was not an exaggeration.
After flying to Australia too.
Right. That wasn't an exaggeration. That wasn't, he was saying, I'm in the middle of a 60-hour shift.
Yep.
So quickly you learn that you really did land in a uniquely perfect spot to be able to tour.
And it's sort of going along with that is that I had known the Osbournes for over a decade before I started working for them.
Right.
So it wasn't, I never felt like a hired hand, because as I'm sure you guys know, you've been in a position yourself that when money and contracts and employment come into something, things change. Right?
Absolutely.
How many relationships are ruined, or how many family ties are loosened because of a business arrangement that goes south. So I was lucky, and maybe I don't know, but I never considered myself just an employee.
Right.
I don't mean that again in an arrogant sense of look at me, I know more, but I always just had that relationship first before I had the employment. So to go then and just work for someone else, just you would have been starting off in a different situation.
Absolutely. And I love that, like, Ozzy Osbourne is the patriarch, the father of his family, and that extended family all the way through those that are working for him, the road crew. Seems like he was a fatherly influence to so many people out there on the road, always looking out for his people. Absolutely.
And if you ever saw Ozzy, I mean, I know you were, depends what show you went to, I guess, no more tours, but it was such a family, and as we touched on, we all know Ozzy had his crazy wild days or whatever, but certainly as he got sober the first time anyway, and as he sort of battled addictions and the rest of it, it always had a family vibe. He had his wife with him and the kids, and it wasn't unusual. Again, I write this in the book. There was one moment, and I just sort of looked around, and one of the kids was I was on the side of the stage. I used to run the teleprompter for Ozzy. And so I stood at the side, I stood 10 feet away from whatever, so I would operate this prompter. And there was one moment, and like one of the kids was dancing, the other kid was on their bike, the other kid was doing it. And I just thought, God, if you could, this is Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
Darkness. And if you could just peek behind the curtain and see, it was more like a kindergarten or a play school, than a Black Sabbath show.
I'm curious. I want to go back a little bit before we start to move forward, because again, as someone who is in recovery, and I loved Ozzy being so open about his recovery in his life, and working on himself. You being a kid who never went that way like Chris and I did. You never had that in you. Do you have any early memories of? It has to be startling to realize, oh wow, that's drugs, and he's different right now. Do you have? Is there an early memory that stands out of like, oh man?
In the 80s, which was when, I guess, if you like, the most innocent time in the sense of Ozzy probably wasn't as big a star as he became.
Right.
And especially in the UK, of course he sold out tours and everything, but he perhaps wasn't at the same level. And then it was more alcohol. It was more drink. Drink was his Ozzy. And even, I never knew Ozzy in the 70s, of course, and that could have well been different when he first discovered drugs. But by the time the 80s came along, Ozzy was booze. It was all day, every day, whatever he could get kind of thing. And it was really booze. And you asked about some of the stories earlier, but again, imagine this. You touched on there about Brazil and Rock and Rio and how I got to know him. And then like a year later, I quit school at 16. I did go back, but I had a month off. I said, for the next month, I'm just going to follow Ozzy. and I had saved up my money, and he was touring the UK and Ireland, and my plan was to get buses and trains and stay in youth hostels, and I just stopped going to school, and the very first, after the first couple of nights in Dublin, they said to me, "You're coming in our tour bus."
Ugh,
love
and
it.
They paid for my hotel rooms.
ugh.
So I am 16 years old,
Yeah.
and I on tour with Ozzy Osbourne for a month around Britain and Ireland. You imagine what that was like. But my abiding memories aren't sort of drug related; they're drink related.
Yeah.
And he played Belfast. He started this year in Belfast, which is my hometown, and then we went to Dublin. And I remember it was the first night in Dublin, and I didn't want. I'm 16 years old. I'm trying to hang with like the greatest, heaviest drinker on the planet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sure, I can, I'd had like 3 beers in my life at this stage, and I'm downing the whiskeys to keep up with him. Anyway, he had a Californian trainer who he was trying to get clean and fit. But it lasted, 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to Dublin, the home of Guinness and Jameson.
Yeah. Great.
Let's get sober there.
Just yeah. On every street corner, there's a vegan Californian Pilates teacher in Dublin. That's right.
Right.
So
I'm going to Vegas to not have sex.
Yeah. I went to rehab in Vegas, so I get it.
Yeah.
So he calls for his assistant. He goes to bed, and he gets he used to carry around an eyebrow shaving kit. It was like a little black bag. It had cream and razors in it, and it would come to a certain time at night. And what he would do, he would call over that again. I don't know if this is different, but back then you had like a night porter in a hotel, somebody who was on duty from when the reception shut down from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Right.
And it was invariably like this old bloke in 75 who was just thinking, I'm going to have a quiet night, and just sit. And Ozzy would be like, just get more champagne, more beer, whatever. Anyway, so he would bribe the porter for the hotel key. We had these rooming lists as everybody's room.
Yeah.
And he would look up and okay, good, whatever the guy's name. But he'd bribe, he'd give the guy £50 or whatever, get the hotel, get the master key, go in, and then while he was sleeping, shave his eyebrow. And so I'm 16 years old. I'm on tour with Ozzy Osbourne in the 80s, the Ozzy Osbourne. And I was just and I learned that first night, you never go to bed before Ozzy. And even depending on the mood he was in, if you went to bed at the same time, you're like, has he really gone to bed? And so you would get all your furniture, and you would drag it in front of the door in these fancy hotel rooms, and I would be lying in bed, listening to make sure that. You talk about learning.
Stephen, you brought up a nuance that I'll bet you have a good answer to this question. As a fan growing up, I remember seeing a rooming list and going, well, who's Louis Cypher? Oh, that's the name that so-and-so uses. I remember one of them was Skip M. Biguinis. Oh, no, it was Skip N. Biguini. Skip and Biguinis. Were there any fake, in other words, what I'm saying is these musicians, because they're so famous, they couldn't stay under their own names. They would have to use an alias, and they would always use these hilarious aliases. What were some of the best aliases that Ozzy used?
My favorite was, so a lot of them were extremely boring, because that was the whole point. Like Ozzy and Sharon used to use Johnson, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Because, there's probably 6 other Johnsons.
Exactly.
Sure.
Very under the radar.
My favorite was Jakey Lee. When Jakey Lee was in the band, he used to go under Fred Flintstone. But we would stay, whenever you stay in a real high quality hotel, the staff pride themselves on knowing the name. Sure. So as you walk out the door, they would say, "Have a good day, Mr. Rea," or "Have a good day," whatever it may be. And so Jakey was on tour with his wife, And so, like 2 weeks into the tour, she threw a fit because all the staff were calling her Mrs. Flintstone.
Mrs. Flintstone. Oh, that is amazing. Oh, I'm curious, again, I'm bouncing around as a fan, seeing your life through your eyes as a fan. So obviously the curiosity about being in the inner sanctum and then seeing candid conversations between your favorite artists is so shocking to be that close, to hear candid conversations, to see the behavior up close and personal. Do you also remember a defining moment where you realized that he was becoming frail? Like I always remember my grandmother coming to visit me. We hadn't seen her in a year. And my mother and I, this is back when, before 9/11, you could actually just go right to the
gate.
The gate. And my grandmother came out in a wheelchair. And my mother was so shocked by her appearance that she turned and just happened to face right at me as tears were coming out. She was so shocked by how much in 1 year my grandmother had deteriorated. And then I found myself having the same moment a couple years ago before my mom passed away. I saw her and I had to look the other way so she wouldn't see that I was crying. Mm-hmm. Do you remember a moment where you realized Ozzy?
So there was two kind of moments, if you like. One was Ozzy and Jack had a TV show called Ozzy and Jack's World Detour.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw it.
I remember that. Yep.
Can't remember which. Was it the History Channel? Maybe it was on. Anyway, they had a TV show where they would travel around and visit unusual things, and they came to my house in New Orleans. I live in New Orleans, and they came on the second season. Maybe they came to my house and spent the day filming, and we just caught up, and it was like Ozzy visits an old friend kind of thing. Anyway, he called me. We'd set up this call for him to sort of say, hey, we're coming over to the house or whatever. And Ozzy had a sort of unique way of speaking, and a lot of people couldn't understand him, especially in the States. They would subtitle a lot of stuff when he was on TV, because he did have an unusual, way of speaking, and he sort of mumbled a bit or slurred his words sometimes. But I always, because I'd spent so many years with him, I never had any trouble sort of deciphering what he said. But that day they set up a call for him to come to the house, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And I remember struggling on the phone to understand him at time. And I remember sort of being like, this is the first time I've known this bloke, 34 years, whatever it was at this stage. And this is the first time I'm struggling just a wee bit to make out what he's saying, But the big one for me was the show, the Back to the Beginning show. I hadn't seen him. He did his No More Tours 2 tour, and I went to see that in Houston, Texas. And that was that 2018 maybe, and then I hadn't seen him since, because as I'm sure you guys know, he got a lot of illnesses.
That's right. Canceled tours and
canceled it. So I hadn't seen him in maybe 6 years, I think. And then we went to the Back to the Beginning show, and I was sort of working that week, and him and Sabbath did a rehearsal, a sound check 2 days before the show. And that was the first time I'd seen Ozzy in the flesh in 6 years or whatever it was. And I was just like, wow. And he did, Mama, which is a charged song anyway. It's very emotional.
Oh yeah.
And he came out I was standing beside, Mike Inez was actually playing. He played in the Mama, and then he came out afterwards, and we stood beside each other to watch the Sabbath sound check. But when he sang Mama, and I could see his hands shaking. If you watch the video on the of the actual show, he holds on to the mic stand, but for the sound check, he was just holding, and the Parkinson's, and he was shaking, and he was singing Mama, and we were all just crying our eyes out. It was those of us who the people who work for Ozzy, like you mentioned, Big Dave, who's been there for many years, and also the other people who work from his closest people have been there decades. You know, Lynn is still working for Sharron, and she's been there more than 40 years. So the people who are close to her, it's not just that they're employees, that they've known him a long time, and all of us were standing crying, watching the sound check, watching her, because it was just so, you could tell he was like putting everything into it,
And Mike also told me that he was struggled playing that song, Mama, I'm Coming Home. And then I remember Mike saying, in a very Mike way, I got to tell that guy, I love you, for the last time on stage at that final performance. And that's the last time I saw him, was on that stage. And
so a couple of things. I'll tell you about Mike. One is, and I spoke to Mike a lot the day that Ozzy died. We phoned each other. You will say maybe 4 times. And, he said to me, the last thing Ozzy ever said to me was on stage, I love you, Mike, I love you, whatever it was, which is so fantastic. What a way to go out, to be one of 4 people in the world on stage with Ozzy, and that being the last thing. And I don't, I haven't talked about Ozzy's funeral. It was very small, very private. If anybody else wants to sort of talk about it, that's fine. But personally, I feel it should be private. But I will tell you this one story, is that Ozzy's coffin, I went up and I said sort of goodbye to Ozzy, and I came back and I was standing there with Mike, and the 2 of us are just standing in front of Ozzy's coffin like this, wiping tears from either their own. And Mike just goes, well, I guess at least this means we don't have to be friends anymore. And I just burst out laughing, and I just thought, oh, brilliant. Ozzy would have loved that.
Absolutely.
Ozzy would have found that funny. And I just burst, despite myself, I just burst out laughing. At least we don't know Ozzy's dead. At least we don't have to be friends anymore.
Did I see you say in an interview that the last words you had with him haunted you? Was that right?
Well, yeah, yes. So I was, I haven't, that Back to the Beginning show was one like the greatest weeks of my life. I used to be really close to Ozzy. I used to work for Ozzy and all that. And as the year, like everything, all of us, life comes and we change and you drift apart. And so I hadn't spent a lot of time with Ozzy in the last few years. And the day after the show, they'd moved me into his hotel. He'd stayed in this fancy hotel out in like the country. And they said, no, you're going to come and stay with us. So they booked me into the hotel because I was kind of working. I was kind of helping out. Anyway, I got a text. I was packing up the day after the show, and I got a text from someone who works for him. And they said, Ozzy wants to see you. So come up to the suite kind of thing before you leave. And it was so bizarre looking back on it. I don't know why, but I just cried the whole time.
Oh my God.
With him. And I think I was just like so overcome with the sort of completing the circle. It was 40 years since I'd first met him. And I think I was just overcome that the world was there. Everybody who had, the rock world was there, his family was there, everybody who had worked for him or been part of his life, everyone was there. And he had sort of specifically said, I want to see Stephen, So the whole sort of emotion, and I walked into the suite and I just cried. I just stood and cried. And he was just like, you stupid fuckway, and he went to hit me. And he was like, and so we hugged, and the pictures in the photographs in the book. So that was 40 years and 6 months since my first photograph with him, since I first met him, that thankfully somebody who worked for him took a bunch of pictures of me and Ozzy, like hugging and saying goodbye or whatever. And then the last thing, as I walked out, he said, the last thing he said to me was, call if you need anything. We've known each other a long time, Stephen Rea.
Wow.
And that was the last. And then 2 weeks later, I got the call, So haunted isn't perhaps the right word, in the sense of I don't lie awake at night thinking I should have done this, I should have done that. But I'm just so grateful that after 4 decades, I got that final private moment. Well, I say private, I mean, there was a bunch of people in the suite, you know, but I got like the audience with the Pope kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know? Just got that second to sort of, and for him, you know, that's the last words he ever said to me.
Yeah, that's a powerful moment. Like everybody in the world in rock and roll was there, all wanting their moment with Ozzy.
Yes.
And Ozzy wanted his moment with you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Where were you when you got the call?
I was home in New Orleans. So Lynn, the woman that answered, called up about that letter 40 years ago.
Wow.
I was sitting at home in New Orleans and the phone rang and I could see it was Lynn. And I was like, oh, great, you know, because it's, you know, she doesn't call me right, you know, and I jumped up to go closer to the router because it's a WhatsApp call. You want to do Wi-Fi. And I called and she just said, where are you? And I'm like, I'm home, you. And she said, oh, you're at home. Good. She said, I'm calling with the worst possible news. And she told me. And I don't think, again, I'm sure all of you guys have experienced that. It doesn't really sink in. You know, you don't really take it in. And I was like, oh, okay, well, when's the funeral? Next week? Okay, well, I'll come over. And she's like, go and have a cup of tea. I was like, okay. And like the next 2 days, I was just a basket case. I mean, Mike Inez, Robert Trujillo from Metallica, Mike Borden from Faith No More. Those are the guys I'm sort of closest to. They were all in Ozzy's band, and we were just on the phone to each other, you know, just like, oh my God. And after maybe a couple of days, I was just like, I can't take this anymore.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I just need to get a flight. I just need to go over there. So I booked a flight and flew to London. And there was a lot, it was like a gig. You know, again, I tell this in the book, what would have made Ozzy laugh is that we were all here, like, near his house. And it was the tour manager and his security and the transport. And we were all together.
The team.
And we kept saying like, what, you know, straight after the gig, we're going to do, oh no, it's not the gig, it's a funeral. You know, and we kept saying, look, you know, look, we have to leave here at 9. It's show day. I mean, not show day, you know, the service, you know, it was just funny. He would have enjoyed like that one final gig because all of us were just so used to being with each other in a different setting. You know?
Listen, for the last hour, all we did was analyze the psychology of what it's like meeting your hero and having a life with that hero. We didn't get into any, and when I say there are details, it is a day by day, city by city breakdown. The book is called Ozzy and Me, and what an incredible life you've had. It's really beautiful, and the more stories I hear about Ozzy, the more beautiful he becomes. He really loved fucking with people. He loved
shaving eyebrows.
But loved that people bought into the image, but just was a guy by everyone's description that just wanted to talk about what was going on in the news today. And was just a person who there's no stories of him saying anything remotely close to, do you know who I am? He just really was an everyday human.
100%. And you know, I've done a few interviews for the book or whatever, and some people have said, oh, tell me one thing about Ozzy that nobody knows or whatever. And you're exactly right. He was riddled with insecurity right to the end. Right to the end. You know, he wouldn't believe that Metallica or Guns N' Roses ever would show up for him. He was Ozzy never ever realized his place on the Pantheon of rock. He didn't realize how much he was revered and how respected he was as one of the greatest rock singers that there's ever been. He was right to the end. He had that imposter syndrome that, you know, he wasn't that good and he couldn't do this and he wasn't worthy. And he was just constantly mystified when they would say, you know, Eric Clapton wants to play on your album. And he goes, Eric Clapton wants to play on my album? You know, he never, to the end, he never realized just how important he was.
I've heard a few stories from people that were close to him talking about how he would get an advanced copy of music that was coming out. He'd listen and go, ugh, and he hated it. He would hate it.
Yeah.
Which is like all of us, really. I mean, it's, I hate watching myself on camera. But to think of Ozzy Osbourne just going,
absolutely, 100% right. So in the last show, I saw him after, I was talking about the day in the hotel afterwards, but also just after the show, he came out to like this VIP room type thing. And I went over to him and I said, Ozzy, I'm so happy for you. That was fantastic. You sounded incredible. And he goes, yeah, it wasn't bad, was it? and honestly, as whatever's in the book, 219 shows or whatever it is that I've seen, honestly, that might have been the most praise I've ever heard him give any show.
Really? It wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad, was it? And he was so, I honestly can count on the fingers of the amount of times he came off on stage and went, what a show there. Normally it was like, wasn't good enough.
Wow. I watched a bunch of interviews with you and it bothered me how much everybody was just going to the same spots and tell us a crazy story. And I just wonder, in all the interviews you've done, is there anything that you've been hoping somebody would ask you so that you could reveal something that you've been wanting to reveal?
No, I've done what my favorite question, I think, was what somebody said to me, name your 3 favorite Ozzy songs.
Ooh, okay.
And I was like, God. And I had to then, put me on the spot because no, not really. I mean, I have analyzed, obviously, as you do. I mean, I spent almost 6 years writing this book. It was next month will be 6 years since I started writing this. So it's been a long time. And
so right after you saw him in Houston, then. Yeah.
And I'm proud of the book, and I'm proud of the story, and I'm so grateful for my relationship with Ozzy. I am sorry that he never got to read it, because Ozzy did used to like to read, and I wish he could have read the book, just because he never took anything. So I'm sure he would have told me it was the biggest pile of crap.
Absolutely.
But no, I don't think there's anything that I've ever sort of said, I hope, I'm keeping this. I hope this comes out of it. There's really no, I mean, I hope that there's only so much you can do. I've known the guy 40 years and I knew the guy 40 years, I should say. And there was a lot of stuff that didn't make the final cut, but hopefully all the good stuff's in there,
And I think as an Ozzy fan sitting here with 2 other Ozzy fans, I'm going to speak collectively for the world and answer that question. What are the top 3 Ozzy Osbourne songs? The correct answer is all of them. Done.
Any Ozzy, absolutely 100%. Any Ozzy.
Yep.
I would love to talk to you again after I've gone through, because I want to see if your stories and Mike Inez's stories line up and match up.
Hey, I didn't. You tell Inez. I told him. I said I left out most of those stories about him burying those hookers in Vegas.
Yeah.
Breaking news.
Yeah. And my God, Stephen. I mean, it all starts with his mother caring about her boy and wanting to write a letter to the Ozzy Osbourne Fan Club to say, my son, who is your biggest fan, would love to see his show. Can you imagine if it was Michael Jackson and we got Stephen today?
There'd be a different result, though.
Oh, it'd be like My Butt Hurts by Stephen Rea. It'd be, here's Stephen to talk.
My jaw won't close.
Yeah.
But I feel it's a great, and you guys obviously know because you're in the industry. But it's just one of the reasons I wanted to tell this story was because it was just so crazy. And today, for today's generation, like, my daughter's big band at Ghost. My daughter's a huge Ghost fan.
She got great taste.
And they, and I just think, can you imagine her writing to the Ghost fan club?
Right.
And Tobias, like, taking her under his wing and having breakfast with her and I'm spending Christmas, with them. It's just such a crazy story that will never happen again.
Yep.
Never. Yeah. Everything is so controlled.
And it all started with Napster.
Yeah.
They had all that record money in the 80s. They could buy the fan club members rooms at their hotel.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Thanks, streaming.
It was very relatable to me. I have this unique story about living at Eddie Van Halen's house for a period of time
really?
in 2004. So I know that a unique set of circumstances can put you right in a very private area with a hermit. So I know what that.
You talking about him or you?
Well, obviously not me. I'm the Ligger who's at every show trying to get the water out of catering. Yeah. But
it's more than musicians, the hermits.
Yeah,
it's hard to get me out of the house.
But Ozzy and Me, what a book! You got to get it, and would love to do a follow up with you to talk in detail about the stories that we haven't even covered yet.
And Stephen, how can people go about getting the book Ozzy and Me?
Well, I hope it's available in any local bookshop. If they don't have it on the shelves, they should be able to order it, or Amazon.com, or it's the fancy New York publisher, Simon & Schuster. I'm sure they'll be happy to take your money as well. So
awesome.
Anywhere, what do they say? Anywhere good books are sold.
There we go.
All right. And any
ones as well.
any websites or social media you want to direct people to for yourself?
I'm Facebook.com/SteveORea, STEVOREA, or just Stephen-Rea.com is my website. I'm still a bit analog when it comes to, I've got Facebook and a website, no Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
How about your MySpace page? Which one was that one?
Yeah, MySpace. Right.
Stephen, thanks for joining.
Write me a letter to my fan club.
Yeah.
There we go. Old school. And it all comes back around.
Stephen, absolutely incredible. What an incredible story you have. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
And we are definitely going to follow up on this. So Stephen Rea, everybody.
Ozzy and Me.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, man.
And Chris, Kael, and I are on tour. Get our tour dates at getgas.com. Get gas with 2 S's.com. We're coming to a city near you.
Chris Kael and the King of Credits.
Yep.
Coming to you.